Hi guys, welcome to the Social Block. I hope you had lovely holidays, Happy New Year. I hope you have some really good New Year's resolutions in there. And I hope you had a really great time over our little break. I'm really happy that we're back. I'm also really happy that so many of you tuned in to watch our holiday special. It definitely took a little out of us to put it out during the holidays, but I'm so happy that we did because we really saw some great interest. As usual, you're watching the podcast that explores the intersection between blockchain technology and society. We're going to take a whole year, a whole new season 2 of the Social Block, to look at how the new technology that is blockchain is going to shape our culture, our lives, us as individuals, our institutions, absolutely everything. And yeah, I'm really excited. So today's episode is about how we're going to build with the consumer in mind in the blockchain space. Also a little bit about UX. Our guest is Azeem Khan. He's from Morph. And so a little bit about Azeem. He's worked with Gitcoin for a while. He's a consultant at UNICEF and brought a lot of blockchain solutions through UNICEF to big corporations. So a lot of really exciting stories there. He's also someone who works with the World Economic Forum, something that he does, something really interesting about him. Really interesting guy. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. So, hi Azeem, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's 7 a.m, but it's really good to be here and to chat with you.
That's awesome. So why don't we start by telling our listeners a little bit more about you and your role at Morph?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am co-founder and COO on a new EVM L2 called Morph. Obviously, that sounds cliche at this point because it seems like every other week there's a new L2 coming out, and all anyone's asking is like, what is the reason that you're launching another L2? I'm literally telling people since I've recently left my position at Gitcoin that they're like, oh, so like, what are you doing next? And I've just like, as a joke, just been like, well, of course, like I'm doing the most cliche thing. And I've actually had multiple people be like, no, you're not launching an L2. And so, yes, we're launching an L2, and despite the environment where it's seen as very cliche, I think we have an interesting competitive advantage and way to be able to onboard more people to Web3. And I don't think it's going to be just creating short-term incentives so that we're giving airdrops to people. It's like to actually bring more people on chain, because the short-term Ponzi-nomics are cool and some people end up getting very rich very quickly. And while we're not saying that those are bad things, that's not how you create long-term sustainable companies. We're looking at like, how are we going to be the L2 in mind 5 years from now and 10 years from now, as opposed to how are we going to have the largest fully diluted volume 12 months from now.
Yeah, I feel like what you said about the airdrops and L2s is so true. I think it's so many of them, they'll do an airdrop, and airdrops are really effective at getting people into the L2 to begin with. But then I think like all of these L2s end up with like such a low transaction rate per like minute or whatever. It's like literally less than one, or I don't know, something like that. Mm-hmm. So you're so right in saying that like long term, people actually aren't using these solutions. They're just kind of like in it for the airdrop, and then they just kind of hope a miracle happens with the token. So
Exactly. And anyone who's been in crypto, like you, whether you've been fortunate enough to like, without trying, get access to an airdrop, or if there's entire Telegram groups and Discords and paid communities that will teach you how to do airdrop farming. And like, while that's cool, all it really means is that like you can generate a lot of bots trying to use your system in anticipation. And then there are just a bunch of people who, in my prior role at Gitcoin, we like focused a lot on like this like anti-Sybil work with a protocol called Gitcoin Passport. And so I've had to dive deep into understanding just how crazy that sect of the crypto ecosystem goes. But like the reality is like, unless you're actually doing things to create real value, you're going to end up having a chart that like does this and then like completely drops, because the first few days you get to have a token price where the price keeps going up, and it's literally just a bunch of people waiting claiming their airdrops, and then just dumping on you. And then after that, like they're done with you because they're on to the next one.
Yeah. Well, so I think we've covered kind of like where like there's the gap of long-term thinking with the L2's situation. But like this episode is going to be very focused on the consumer-centric chain and like building more long-term chains. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what it means to be building a consumer-centric solution or chains, L2s? What does that look like? How does it differ from how most people are building right now?
Yeah, so I'll backtrack a little and or like move back a little bit and talk about like my time in this crypto space as a whole. So I got involved in crypto about a decade ago. Actually, this past week was the decade anniversary of an article that I released with the Huffington Post about the New York City Bitcoin Center having opened. And so I went to a New Year's Eve party that they did at the end of 2013. And this was, I'd gotten into Bitcoin in like 2012, like just like reading about like the monetary philosophy and monetary theory. I have parents who are immigrants. I couldn't afford to like go full time into crypto for a very long time. It couldn't just be like this hobby that didn't pay the bills, but I was always really interested by it starting around 2012. And I was writing for the Huffington Post. And in 2013, I met a bunch of people on Twitter who were like, hey, come to, this event that we have. And if you're interested by what you see, we would love for you to write about it. And went to this party, and it was the most fascinating amalgamation of people. It was like a 1920 stock exchange. Bitcoin at the time was like a couple $100. And so people were literally just like really drunk and then bidding on Bitcoin, like in that like 1920 style, like, I'll give you 500. No, I'll give you 600.
Shouting.
They were using QR codes. Yeah. And they were using like QR codes to buy it off each other. And I was just like, this is fast. It was fascinating, right? Because it was like, you talk to them and they weren't crazy people. Like they were really intelligent people that were talking about, decentralized currency and centralized currencies and all of these things. And so that was my like first intro into the space and starting to meet people. And my first attempted project in the space was in early 2014. I tried launching something called Kim Kardashian. And yeah. I
was just not expecting to hear that coming from a man, like for this idea to be a man's idea.
It was just,
didn't see it coming.
It was just like, it was honestly like a little bit of a troll, right?
Yeah.
I was just like, this is funny. And I had a friend who was an illustrator, like make an image of like what looked like Kim in a token and like put up a landing page and put up a Twitter page. But like, there was no Ethereum. I would have had to know how to like launch my own Bitcoin. I had no idea.
Your own blockchain from scratch. Well, not from scratch because open source, right? But
yeah, but like I am not technical, right?
Me neither.
And it was just a joke.
Gone.
Yeah, it was just a joke. And then like Newsweek even picked it up, and so all of a sudden I was like, oh shit! And then very quickly had a cease and desist come for like
from Kim.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
From the Kardashian, like the lawyers.
Obviously not directly from her.
No, obviously not directly, but like,
but yeah.
It was like, and very quickly I was like, yeah, I can't afford to do this. I'm sunsetting this. But I remember when I was doing interviews, I was like, wait, like what if the Dallas Mavericks had a coin? What if American Airlines had a coin? What if artists and athletes actually had coins? And like, it was like sort of the precursor to what have become social tokens. And while social tokens haven't like taken off yet, it was years in advance. And I was like, this is a really interesting idea. And then years later in 2017, I was like part of what was going on in all of the like ICO boom. I was buying and selling. I was in Telegram groups. I was in Slacks. I was doing like marketing and strategy work for different people and organizations. I was being paid in a bunch of Bitcoin. I sold all of those Bitcoin. I've been selling my Bitcoin since the price was less than $100. Anyone who tells you like, I wish I could go back and have bought Bitcoin for like really cheap, either they lost it or they sold it. Like almost everyone, the people who actually like kept it and held it with conviction, I have so much respect for. Because like I was like, I got it at 100. I sold it at 1,000. I must be a trading savant. And so, yes, so like 2017, like involved again, but like my marketing and strategy work was like, guys, you have to stop talking about crypto being crypto for crypto's sake. And they didn't understand it. And then in 2019, I tried raising money for a crypto gaming company. And this was still way too early because every VC sort of laughed at me. And I was like, no, like if you can make games that people actually want to play and you make the stuff in their NFTs, like fully focusing on consumer narratives of being like, if you brought Kanye West in, I have a background in music industry. I like spent quite a bit of time. And so I was like, oh, like if I bring in like these people into the space and we use like the ideas of scarcity and like the way all of the stuff works for hype for Kanye West sneakers and things like that, we'd actually be able to do something amazing. And they just like VCs just didn't get it.
Yeah, but 2019 was still very early. I feel like the blockchain space has an issue of being severely over financialized. And because I joined in 2019 and I just remember how it was all banking, it was all finance. And then the Web3 gaming, the NFT narrative, that only came in like a full year and a half later. So I totally see how like it was just too early. But the vibe I'm getting like from these stories you're telling is exactly that consumer-centric to you means kind of what the idea of this podcast is as well. Is like, how do we use the technology for everything? Like all of these like tokenomics models, the actual tech using coins, using smart contracts, using NFTs for just various things that are already going on in society and people's lives.
That's exactly it. Like, as I've gone about all of this stuff, I'm always just like, how do we abstract away the blockchain? Because my biggest issue dating all the way back to when I first started having conversations with people in the space was like, nobody cares that you're using a blockchain. Like, and nobody should care that you're using a blockchain. Like, it's like if you were a Web2 company, you would never go to a VC or to your potential user and say, my competitive advantage is that I use MySQL for my database architecture. Like people would laugh at you. Like they just would completely laugh. To me, it's my mother knows how to use ChatGPT. My mother knows how to use her iPhone and her iPad all day long. She has like gotten good at like being able to use things on Facebook Marketplace. And so it's being able to have like good products that have good functionality. Like she doesn't care how any of those things work, but she's a 68-year-old woman who was born and raised in Pakistan. And like, she's not some sort of like super tech literate like person, like grew up like myself having devices and gadgets all the time. But these are things that like make enough sense to her. Yesterday, she was on ChatGPT asking it about the benefits of eating Brazilian nuts and talking to me about like the selenium percentages in it and not eating too much of them to not get like selenium toxicity, right? And so we're not at the place. It's exactly what you said is like everyone is literally just building to be able to financialize things and to do pump and dumps and to have a bunch of Ponzi-nomics. And from as far back as I got into this space, I've been like, no, like there's a way to do this the right way where we actually onboard people, think long term. Perhaps we don't make as much money in the short term, but in the long term, we beat out everybody. And so this goes into even my time at Gitcoin. For almost 2 years, I'd literally been focusing on like meeting with all of the developers in the community, meeting the centralized exchanges, meeting the venture funds, knowing the DeFi protocols, knowing the NFT projects. And I got this really interesting 10,000 foot view of the whole ecosystem. And like, you're the wallets, you're the bridges, you're the DEXs, you're the L2s. And I got a chance to chat with all of the key decision makers at all of these places. And as I went about thinking, like, how do we go about really pushing things for Morph? Part of it is really just like talking to your community and your potential users differently. And so like bringing it all the way back, this idea of like what we think about consumer, it's very all encompassing of that as opposed to like me having like these super technical conversations with you about why my tech is better than your tech. Cause
yeah, that's the dev-centric building versus the user-centric building. It's when developers build for developers and everybody else just becomes completely isolated. And there's so many facets to that. Like it comes down to the lack of proper UI. Like, honestly, there's just so many projects where I'm just like, there is no UI to this. The user experience is just nada. So I was reading about UX specifically because Nexo is so focused on bringing proper, decent UX to crypto and to the blockchain space. And I think we do it quite well. Like, honestly, like when I'm just going through my app and I'm like, I know where everything is. It's like a normal app. But one of our UX designers, actually, I spoke to him. His name is Vladi. I'm going to link his Twitter somewhere in the description for everyone because he just gave me such good insights. And he was like, we're actually moving into a new paradigm here. Right now, with like UX, UI, it's always just been kind of like this command-centered situation where, you click a certain button, which is a certain command, and it does a certain thing, and then you do another command, and like the app does another certain thing. Whereas now, with the advent of AI and the way it's kind of penetrating into our world and our space, we're moving towards an intent-focused way of commanding our apps. So, we tell the app or the software what we want as a result, and it figures out how to do it. Like, there's a lot of problems with that in terms of like the fact that we don't when we don't know how the AI builds the process of how we get the result, we'll be like less likely to know how to fix it and figure it out. But like we can still iterate with like polishing the intent and everything. But I think that's a really interesting paradigm that's coming into crypto specifically. And we've talked about this a lot in the AI episode before about how crypto is just a little bit more open-minded towards AI. And there's two sister industries that seem to be flourishing together. And the crypto people are just really tapping into that. So that's something that I think might be a potential game changer for crypto and UI. But I have like a criticism of UI that's too good. And you mentioned earlier how, nobody cares that they're using blockchain underneath all of that, right? I get that because that's exactly kind of what we're doing at Nexo in any way. Like, we don't want people to have to like worry about the addresses, stress about, getting things wrong. We're this layer that's on top of all that. You just need to push the buttons. Like, everything is like in normal language. But my criticism of that is the educational angle. And so the problem with that is that there's so many like teenagers right now using TikTok and Instagram. They don't actually know what the app is. They don't know that there's code behind it. They don't get it. And I'm really concerned. And there's people like kind of analogically to that, there's people who don't know what their bank actually does. All they know is that that's where their money goes and that's where they go to get their money. That's very, very scary. So that's like a fundamental lack of understanding in the mass population of the technological background of what we're using, and then a mass lack of understanding of the financial systems that we're using. And I just think that's really dangerous in a very specific way. And I was talking to another colleague. So Nexo kitchen conversations are just the best. So I was talking to her and I was like, yeah, I was in the kitchen and I was like researching the podcast. It's like, I don't have an angle. And she talked to me a little bit and she was just like, you know what? I firmly believe that we need to let people struggle a little bit. We need to let them have to find out what is actually powering these really user-friendly, really good solutions that they're using, because that's going to make us a better society. That's going to make us thinking, reasoning human beings. If we go too far into that like AI type what I need, it just gives me result, I never have to ever think about it, we're going to end up a very non-critical thinking society. And I think that's dangerous. And also, yeah, so I think we're on the right track with like building a really polished, really clear interface for people to interact with blockchain. But I think people should give a shit that it's blockchain. And I'm really, really specific about that because we don't understand what the problem is with unchecked centralization in society. People don't really think about it at all. But there's an issue with that. And that's why I think they should know when they're using blockchain. And that's a different educational angle. So that's just a little bit of like a kind of like a bite at that.
Look, the education thing is something that I've been since back in 2012 and 2013, like the crazy crypto friend, basically, to like everyone. And in recent years, I've definitely had people be like, I wish I had listened to you in 2014 when you said to do this, this, and this. For me, explaining why crypto is or blockchain is better has absolutely been an integral thing in being able to get people, at least at this early stage, to understand why feasibly these products are better than the next product. And so like my brother, huge gamer, super avid gamer, but he's one of the gamers who sort of still hates crypto and NFTs.
My brother is the
I was pitching
same.
him in
He's just like, I don't want to do Web3 gaming. There's like a financial aspect to it. And I'm just like, oh, dude.
Yeah, I do think it's like partially the fault of the way that crypto gaming to date has really pitched like the financial part of being a gamer.
Yeah,
more
that's
than
what
the
my
fun
brother
part
doesn't
of
like,
being a gamer.
because my brother's quite young, so he doesn't necessarily really have money, and he's in the fun
Yeah.
area. So I do understand where he's coming
That's
from.
it. Yeah, so like we haven't, and I think it's partially because going back to the Ponzi-nomics of like when crypto gaming really started taking off in 2021, everyone was like, in 6 months, we're going to have this amazing game. And like, if you know what any of these games take in terms of time and like, even if you have the money, like the kinds of quality developers you need for years to be able to put out a good product, I knew it was like, this is all a scam. We're hopefully getting to the point in the closer future where like there are actually better products that focus on the fun that are being made. But like when I talk to someone like my brother, I'd be like, look, like you and I both play Call of Duty, right? Or Fortnite. And I'm like, you know, like if you were able to say that you were playing earlier on and you were able to grind to get certain skins or certain characters or certain things in the game, you do get to show them off when you're playing. But wouldn't it be awesome that you would be able to say like, hey, Fortnite can't shut my account down. And even if they do try to shut my account down, these items that I grinded for from season 2 of Fortnite are items that I can now like I actually own technically, and I'd be able to sell them or trade them with other people. And I was like, to be able to do that the same way you can with your physical goods. I was like, if you have a pair of sneakers or a t-shirt you really like, you can do the same thing. And so I completely agree with you that like, if you are able to understand the more fundamental aspects on a per product basis, why certain things are better, I actually think it helps with actually onboarding the users, because my brother has become way less anti-crypto and has been looking at what Nouns has been doing in the esports space. They recently had a proposal passed for like somewhere between $2 and $3 million. And he was like sending me links. He was like, what's this Nouns thing? And I was like, oh, Nouns DAO is amazing. You should look into Nouns DAO. And now I have him sending me links of it when like before he was completely not interested. And so I do think what you're saying is important, but I think it comes from, or it will work by being able to say like, the reason you should sort of give a shit that it's crypto is because it's actually just a better product. And like, you can then tell them like this decentralization, like how like self-custody, any of these other things. But I think it goes back to like, it still has to be a better product. And we haven't made
a better product
yet.
They're just not user friendly enough. They are, some of them are quite user friendly, but not enough. And I think beyond that though, it's exactly that we haven't been able to explain to people why the products are better. And I was watching a really good talk from last year's DevCon in Bogota. It was by Vince Major, my Ether wallet, I think, is where he was working there at the time. And it was really good because he was explaining why we're not able to get adoption coming in. And one of the first things he said was like, the words, guys. We are using words that people don't understand. Like, you know, HODL is all fine and well. It's very funny once you're in the space, like you start loving the jargon. I love crypto jargon. I think it's a whole other language. And I just love how I understand it. And like not everybody would. And it makes you feel really self-important. But there's a huge issue with that because, you know, from the get-go, we are setting a language barrier to people outside that we don't even realize. And it's a very high language barrier. Like it's higher than any other industry I've ever like kind of popped in and out of. Cause like I have had like my little stint in theater and, you know, and all sorts of like different situations. I moved around a lot as a kid. Like I've been through quite a few, like I've lived in quite a few countries for over 4 years. I have never felt I've never struggled so much with a language as much as I struggled with crypto English, because it's loaded and it's difficult.
That second part of what you said, I think is even more important, is that like, it's something I've thought about where like I think a big thing I've seen is one of the issues is that crypto people are so focused on being the coolest crypto person to other crypto people. Like they just like want to be able to impress like the niche of crypto Twitter to like be able to sound cool. So they like use a bunch of like overly philosophical language at times, a bunch of jargon at times, words at times that have like completely regular meanings that you can explain to anyone else and in English that they would get. But the second part I've thought a lot about is how and I've written about this like for CoinDesk, was like, there's like a Western entitlement that also comes to being in crypto.
Yeah, because native English speakers and
it's just for native English speakers. It's like all of it is for native English. And the irony behind that is that the Westerners are technically who would definitely would benefit less from mass adoption of blockchain technology, where like we talk a lot about the global South. We talk a lot about empowering the unbanked and the underbanked. And then you mentioned Bogota. And then all of a sudden, everyone gets afraid to go to Bogota. All of a sudden, everyone gets afraid to go to Turkey. All of a sudden, they have to be around any sort of people of any color that they say that they're actually making products to help. They don't even have the guts that it takes to just sit down with those people, to hang out with those people, to understand their culture, to understand their society, to like be able to delve in, like, how do you make products for people you don't know how to interact with?
Oh, wait, so, you said interact.
Other than,
hang on. This was the second point that the Vince Major made at the Bogota DevCon. And it was that we are suffering from like an epidemic of a lack of soft skills in crypto. And the reason is like the final point that he made was like, we are unable to connect to one another human to human because we're walking around like crypto is still for a large, like it's dominated by people with hard skills. So that's mostly your devs, right? And I don't really want to say that there aren't devs with good social skills, but when they come and they explain something to me and I'm just like, I understood nothing and you could have said that so simply. And then you have people who kind of try to understand some stuff and like work with the devs and then they start to translate. And those are usually your people who are in marketing and PR, the media. But it's still an issue because there's less people with those soft skills. So when you go to like a DevCon, the last one I went to was ages ago. I was in Barcelona at the Avalanche Summit. And it's like just so many people speaking this technical language and you go around to like a certain amount of booths and like nobody can really explain to you, like connect to you as a human. You don't need to explain your layer 2 to me because I'll probably not understand it anyway. What you need to explain to me is practically why your layer 2 is significant, why it can help me in simple kind of like almost social terms. What does it do? What is your tech doing for me as just like a girl who lives in Bulgaria? They can't explain that to me because that's not what they're thinking about. That's not how they communicate. So our inability in this space to connect to each other as people is just like, we're never going to get adoption if we don't start humaning. We're still humans, you know?
Yes. And it's like, and that's the big thing that like my focus is on in how we go about any of what happens with Morph is like finally being in the position to have like, I'm like, look, guys, like I'm essentially trying to give you a canvas to build on with Morph. Because for builders, like at the end of the day, they are definitely the most important people in that aspect of things. But even for them, I haven't seen anyone be able to communicate in this like L2 war that's going on. Why is my L2 better than that L2 to be able to build on? And because no one even knows how to communicate to the developers. They're just like, the technology. And like that doesn't end up winning. It's something that I've seen time and time again. And our focus is going to be so much more like being able to explain to the developer ecosystem why it is that you would want to build on Morph. And then also being able to explain the same to the business ecosystem. And this is something I've seen a lot is many projects in the space, not just L2s, like they suffer from the inability to communicate any of those things, to be able to say like why, like to just be like, well, we have fraud proofs. Like that doesn't. I
don't know what that means.
Like, exactly. It's just like they're just like they're not made up words, but like they're made up.
What I hate most though is like when I go up to a dev or like someone who's like in a product team and I ask them, like they tell me something and I'm just like, what is that? Because I'm a really curious person. I like tech. Like if you explain the nitty gritty to me, I will probably remember. And like within a month or so, I can connect the dots. I'm not that stupid. But what I get really annoyed with is like this, like, oh, she doesn't even get it. Like, you know, the eye roll, the dev eye roll of death. Like, I hate
it. Oh, yes. I get
it so much as a non-technical person. I'm just like, I live in this space too. I work in blockchain too. Just because I don't code and I don't understand the technical things doesn't mean I don't, like, I'm not allowed to ask the questions and get what I need out of you as information.
I've almost seen it, and it like, maybe it's not exactly this far, but at times it's felt like it is that the people who are like really popular in crypto are people who were never popular in regular life, right? Like, it's like a mean way to say it, but like they were not people who were like the popular kids. And one, I think that that's caused like an aversion to what would be the popular kids. And part of that does entail the marketers, the media people, the PR people, the communicators, the ones with the soft skills. But secondly, I think part of it has to do with like subconsciously or consciously, they actually really enjoy that they've created this like community of people where they're considered micro and in some ways
where they are
like
the popular, like, yeah, their style of communication is the popular one.
And they don't want that to change. I have personally felt that in like a lot of conversations with the kinds of devs that you're talking about, with the kind of builders that you're talking about, is I think that to them, like, they're like, wait, like, I don't want this to change. I don't want to become less popular again. And at times I think it's conscious, but most of the times I think it's subconscious, is that like, they're finally popular. Like, people engaging with their posts, they get to go to places and have talks where like everyone runs up to them and it's like, oh
and
my
you know
God,
what the thing is, they
proofs are
deserve
the best.
it. They deserve that credit. They deserve to be where they are. It's just like like a belief in yourself kind of situation, and like trying to retain that, being like unsure that like, oh my God, it's actually happening, because they deserve it. Like, they're really smart people. And I mean, you know, when you were talking earlier about how you were the weird crypto friend because you kept talking to people about crypto, I was the opposite of that. I was the person who works at a crypto firm and hasn't told, like, I wouldn't tell people what my company actually does. Like, I was very quiet. Like, I wouldn't really tell people that I have some crypto or that I'm learning about blockchain, because I was like, I don't actually want them to know, because I know that this is going to start like a big conversation. And I know that, like, as a person with the soft skills in the blockchain space, the non-technical skills, somebody, I don't want to say like any names, like somebody's just going to come at me with like, oh yeah, you know, I've been coding for like 10 years. I work in like, I don't know, cybersecurity, blah, blah, blah. And they're going to come at me with like so much tech. And the only thing I have as a defense is like the more ideological side of crypto and blockchain, that's what I'm in it for. So I would keep really mum about it. I was just like, you know, I'd listen to so many of my friends, mostly males, talk about how, you know, they bought Binance, like they were on Binance and, you know, they traded this crypto and they earned like $30. And I'd just be like, you know, just like quiet, like in the backseat of the car, just like, don't say it, don't say anything.
It's definitely something that like I mean, this is a problem in the whole world. This is not just like a blockchain problem, but like the sexism is like part of things that like I can't comprehend, is how much more I've seen it happen. It's actually like our CEO at Morph is a woman.
It's Cecilia, right?
I personally, yeah, Cecilia, and like such a boss, like founder and CEO of an exchange before that was doing hundreds of millions of dollars a year in net profits. And so like such a boss. I love that I have a CEO and co-founder who's a woman. I love that people that we're looking to hire, I've personally been like overemphasizing, like, I want to get women on board. Across the board, I've actually seen like they're way better than working with men. Like, they work harder. For the most part, they're not being recognized nearly as much or being given like the credibility that they should get, but they're like actually better than most of their male counterparts. And so like I've personally just been like, yeah, like, I don't want a bunch of dudes on the team. Like, let's not do that. And the sexism that you face is definitely one of the things that like my fiance is in the crypto space. She's talked to me about it, how like people just assume she knows less. People just assume more negative things just because of her gender on this. So I could totally see like that crypto bro, because I know those crypto bros who like, all of which like we're just lucky. Like, when the bull run is happening, you could literally like, and they've actually done studies on this. Like, you could literally take a chart of companies and they've had monkeys throw darts.
Oh yeah, I know this one. Yeah.
And they've used stock picks based on just monkeys throwing darts And monkeys throwing darts were literally just as good as, if not at times better than day traders.
Do you remember the news about the trading hamster? Like I think it was depending on which hamster wheel he would run, or like which direction he would run on the hamster wheel, that would trade him. It's the same thing, yeah. It was a very successful hamster. And you know what, I remember we were trying to do a release about, it was something very important, and it wasn't product related, it was something security related for the Nexo platform. And we put out a press release and nobody took it. Like the media were completely transfixed by the trading hamster. And I had one of my colleagues actually throw a fit in the middle of the office. She was like, I got beat by a hamster.
But like those are the guys that like I despise in this space. Those are like the finance bro types, the ones who are like, you know, they think they're savants and geniuses, without realizing like the humility of like, when the bull run starts, you can make money on anything, and it doesn't take, you know,
you don't have to be a genius trader or something to make money. Yeah, I also think personally, like I got very lucky falling into the crypto space and in a company where somebody was willing to teach me how to like use blockchain solutions and stuff. Like it's luck. I am not a financial prodigy or a blockchain prodigy. I'm a person.
Yeah, there's like I've been extremely fortunate in this space, and so much of that has come from just being lucky. Like I had an intellectual curiosity about myself. You mentioned that you do too. That's something that I would say like I won't take for myself. I enjoy working hard. I enjoy being able to like try to understand things that I don't already understand. And so all of this really started from like reading monetary theory 11 years ago and being like, wait, like a decentralized currency, no centralized issuer, like, but like none of any of the rest of the stuff. Like when I was a crazy crypto friend, I would just be like, look, please don't buy more than you can afford to lose. I was like, because you may lose. I was like, you might lose it all. I was like, and if you do buy it, I was like, I need you to buy it and not look at it. I was like, I'm not trying to help you earn money in the 1 year time span. I was like, I'm telling you that this over the course of 5 or 10 years is going to end up becoming an extremely valuable asset. Here are a bunch of reasons as to why I can back that claim. However, the day-to-day volatility of this technology and this asset to get to the prices that I'm telling you they will in something like a 10-year timeline, I cannot defend. And so if you're not willing to see 40% down in a single day, then like this isn't for you for now. You can start investing when things stabilize more, and that's okay. But like it's just something that like is tough to explain to most people. So you have to like I sort of enjoyed being a crazy crypto friend, but I would do it in a way where like if they came back to me with criticisms, I was like, I already told you. I was like, don't come to me with what happened in the last month. I was like, I want you to zoom out on that chart. I want you to look at the 5 year of the chart. And I want you to tell me that if this trend does not continue, then it doesn't matter that if you bought it in at 100 or 150, that you're going to make multiples on your money, but in 5 years, not in 1 year. And so like when the NFT boom happened, though, I will say, I told everyone to stay away. All my friends, because in 2019, I started telling everyone like NFTs, NFT gaming, everyone said I was crazy. And then 2021 came, and then the NFT boom started happening. People started hitting me up like, what NFT should I buy? And I was like, if you know what an NFT is, you stay away. I was like, you are not deep enough into the community to be able to take part in the Ponzi-nomics that are going on with NFTs.
I mean, I feel like NFTs are a super powerful technology. They're just currently only being used for like collectibles and just not really being leveraged right now. But
I heard a super interesting theory that like, maybe it's a conspiracy theory. I don't know how to like verify it like by any means, but that the NFT boom that happened in 2021 for the most part was actually driven by the fact that a lot of the money laundering that goes on through art was not able to happen because everything was shut down due to COVID. And so all those people needed to find a way to continue to launder that money anyway, and did it through NFTs. It's a fascinating theory.
That is the dark side of consumer-centric crypto, because that is like exactly a social process that has been brought on chain via necessity, even though it is for malicious means. But yeah, that is also a part of like the consumer narrative. Like it's what do people need and how can blockchain service it? And I purely believe that almost any social process can actually benefit from some level of decentralization and blockchain technology. But yeah, I don't know if that's true. Sounds like very conspiracy theory. So little star there, everybody. This is not our opinion. We're just mentioning it. But yeah, you know, yeah, what your friend said about, when you were like, yeah, don't come to me with a month of like what happened with so many problems happening. And I actually had a couple of thoughts on this because when I was thinking of like what could a consumer centric like building a consumer centric chain look like? And I was just like, well, it's a lot of iteration, isn't it? And, problems are going to come up. Testing, iteration, testing, iteration. That's what Vladi, our UX guy, is always like. You survey your community, you see what's working, you test it with users, with non-users, with everybody, and you collect that information and you iterate. So what happened, if you remember, when the drama happened with Ledger and the decentralized applications recently, and I actually tried to, I was trying to make like a transaction that exact day, and I kind of panicked. Nothing happened. Everything was fine, but it was a huge panic for me. And what I noticed later was that they were talking about, so after that, like solutions for basically giving depermissioning. What is that called? Removing permissions for a certain decentralized app after you make a transaction. Like, would you like to give this, like, stop permissions for this? Yeah, revoking permissions after you've made your transaction, because it's the most logical thing, but we never thought about it until somebody exploited something. And that's the other thing with all the hacks going on in DeFi and everything right now. DeFi is going through the same purge that CeFi went through, like, in 2022. It's being hacked and hacked and hacked, but it's gonna, like, you're gonna weed out all the bad players. You're gonna end up with like some decent ones, people who are willing to fix, to iterate, to fix, to iterate. So yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Like, building a consumer-centric blockchain means iteration and means going back and being like, oh yeah, well, this didn't work, so we'll try this.
Yeah, totally. And that's part of already like what we've been looking at things from, like, is knowing that it's not going to be perfect to start. I mean, nothing is. Apple is consistently releasing patches for iPhones and Apple Watches and iPads and everything else. It's going to be that, but the big focus is like having the people in mind as opposed to having just the technology in mind, because this like war of technology is not going to work. We've already seen it not work. And throughout history, like, mediocre technology that's marketed better wins out against superior technology marketed poorly. Where we see what we're doing as is we're going to actually have superior technology that will also be marketed better. And so in my eyes, obviously every founder should believe this, but like, we actually have what I believe will win out, because we're going to be using better tech and we're going to be trying to communicate why you should be using this outside of just the positive or the pros of like the tech itself.
Yeah, and there's another thing about the tech. I had this conversation with Eric Weiner from Near, how there's so much animosity and competition in crypto right now because everybody is trying to build the best tech and everything and like just explode with their total value locked and everything. But when you think about it, he was just like, it's not about the one app. Yeah, you're building a great app, but we need to think about it as a community of apps. We need to think about how can my solution work with someone else's solution, because that's what's going to get people what they need. No one solution can be big enough or progress fast enough to give a regular human being the services that they need fully. So we need to think about how they connect. We need to work together. And this was also mentioned in the paper Vitalik published in, I think it was like now on the 28th of December, the one with the cyberpunk.
I had a chance to read it, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's quite good. Yeah. It's very like accessible in terms of the way it's written, but he talks about that as well. He talks about having like a cooperative mindset and how apps need to like work together, and that I think what he wrote was building tools, not empires. Everybody, you're building a tool. You don't have this like overly narcissistic view of your project. It is a tool. It might be an amazing tool. It's not an empire. And that's also kind of in line with the ethos of decentralization, because an empire implies ownership and centralization.
I completely agree. I was very fortunate in my time at Gitcoin. I don't know actually of any other role within the ecosystem that would allow people to have had as deep of access to all of the best people across the space working on everything. And I'm like always like very grateful for that. But for me, when I look at it, it's like especially because of my time at Gitcoin, like I don't see any of this stuff as like zero sum games. The space is so small that the idea of us having a crabs in a barrel mentality against each other is something that's only going to hurt us. Like the CEO of JP Morgan and the CEO of Goldman Sachs probably get lunch together all the time. They probably like, you know what I mean? Like all of the people who work at competitive banks and competitive marketing agencies and competitive PR companies, competitive gaming, like whatever it is, everyone knows each other. Everyone's friendly with each other. Like that's just a normal thing. And it's something that I've found, which is so weird in our space, has been that they don't want to do that. And I don't see it that way. I'm like, look, guys, like until we have even 10 million real users of DeFi, like 20 million real gamers on GameFi, like we have, oh wow, that's cool. I've not seen that interaction.
What is that? Was that
the only one
Zoom?
I've seen is yeah, it's the only one I've seen. Yeah. There's like a bunch of these hand gestures.
I remember the hand up in Google, where if you put your hand up, it like, yeah.
Yes.
That one's useful. This is consumer-centric.
Yeah. I did it by mistake the other day, and I found the heart one, and there's one like, I don't know. There's like a rock sign, and like does a light check. Yeah. But like, to me, it's been something where like I'm lucky that because of my time at Gitcoin, I have friendly relationships with people at all of the places and have built my relationships with them as such. I'm hoping that it continues to stay that now that I'm a founder, but I've never seen why we should look at it as this competitive thing. I think it's such short-term thinking to look at it as like this empire building. And you're right, like narcissistic is the right word for it. Like we're talking about trying to create mass adoption. Like we're not at the place we have mass adoption. There is no empire. And these like sort of like tiny feudal empires of like a TBL that gets locked so your token price goes up. And most of these people, they're talking about unrealized gains. Like maybe they've like got a bunch of tokens that are locked, but their tokens are vesting over 3 and 4 year periods. So like they're getting excited at their like potential net worth based on like the price spike of a single day, most of them not being liquid at all. And so like none of that stuff makes sense to me. To me, I'm just like, let's just build shit that people use.
So I wanted to ask you, like, kind of last 2 questions. I want to ask you first about your involvement with UNICEF and how you kind of brought some organizations into blockchain through that, because I thought that was really curious. And then one last question after that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was very fortunate during my time at Gitcoin that Scott Moore, who's the founder of Gitcoin, had tried to bring UNICEF on to Gitcoin to do a grants round. And there had been a handful of reasons that it fell through. And when I joined, the conversations had sort of like restarted, and I was asked by the team to help lead that. And while it was a ton of red tape and a ton of like difficulties and ways in getting that like to happen, it was one of the most fulfilling things. We were in a round with UNICEF at Gitcoin at the end of 2022, where we were able to distribute over $150,000 to 10 projects, like doing 150 total across 10 projects, doing a bunch of amazing things. And another project that I was able to onboard, they reached out after we did the UNICEF round. They reached out in January of 2023, was the American Cancer Society. And so they saw what we had done with UNICEF and were very intrigued at this idea of how Gitcoin does grants rounds and how it's democratic capital allocation. And it took from early January until the end of November when we actually announced that round. But they were another one who they hadn't done anything in crypto before. But the idea of what we were doing for, open sourcing cancer research basically is what we're open sourcing cancer research funding was what we were looking at doing, was one of the like super interesting things that I got a chance to do. And then this was a more contentious one on crypto Twitter was we brought Shell Oil. We were doing at Gitcoin, have done a ton of rounds that are focused on climate solutions for organizations working in Web3. And we started having conversations with Shell, who have a very deep blockchain team that's been around since 2016, which is crazy, like an 8-year-old blockchain team. And they liked the idea of quadratic funding, the way that we were doing things in terms of distributing capital. They were another one where like being able to figure out how you're supposed to do a deal with a DAO when you're a Fortune 10 company that has KYC and KYB and AML and all of those things.
It's complicated when the entity is missing on the other side, when it's like just a bunch of different decentralized people nodes.
Yeah. And so it was difficult making it happen. But it was something that, being able to have a Fortune 10 company do a 6-figure cash deal, they give us $500,000 that we were using to distribute to climate grantees over the course of 4 grants rounds. Gitcoin made no money on that, but it was like super interesting opportunity that I was lucky to be able to lead on. So those are the 3 big ones. And then at the moment, I am a consultant with the UNICEF crypto fund. It's a very like short part-time thing, but it was basically like, I have a bunch of relationships that they don't necessarily have. And I would love to be able to feed those relationships to them so that they can continue doing things using crypto for good. Because if we use crypto for good, it's another part of like where mass adoption can take place. I'm a fervent proponent of the fact that social impact is probably the biggest killer app within crypto that we're not recognizing properly yet. And like,
this is the whole point of the podcast, social impact with blockchain and crypto.
Yeah.
So,
And so,
given your, basically like your relationship with like all of these people in the blockchain crypto space and like your consulting duties, let's say at UNICEF, what do you see as the killer app, like specifically within social impact? Where do you think there's an industry that is just going to flourish, explode, or be completely transformed if only it could adopt even like a fraction of blockchain's technological value and like capabilities? Like, what's the one that you think is the best one?
It's funny because it goes all the way back to what people were talking about in the earliest iterations of the Bitcoin narrative. Was I think remittances are going to be like the ability of us being able to like comfortably move capital in a very quick way to people all over the world that they get in a matter of minutes, and being able to create networks where they can actually access that liquidity if they don't already have places that they can spend. I have family in Pakistan. We send them Western Union all the time. It's not an effective thing. And I think I like read a study before that was like, you can literally mail like an iron, like an anvil from the United States to Japan faster than you can transfer money in a bank account to a bank account to clear it in Japan. Like, that's not how the world can work when we're as hyper connected as we are. And so to me, when disasters occur, being able to like distribute capital, when you want to be able to like work at figuring out how microloans work in different developing nations, when you want to be like, there's so many of these like basic financial instruments for the and underbanked that to me would unlock the global south in a way that would create tons of users and tons of everything that crypto says that they're looking to do. But really, they just like are always focused on like the new Ponzi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think like the listeners who have been with us from the beginning would know we did a whole episode actually on remittances and like cross-border transactions. So if you're interested in like what's going on in my head about that, just episode 2, Esteban Villegas leads us through that. That's a really good one. So for our listeners, for whoever wants to hear me talk about, I think it was canned pears and shipping them across the world. That was my example. But I have a really, really like tight opinion on this as well. I think the real consumer-centric application of blockchain, like one of the ones that's just like always sparks in my brain, like my neurons go crazy, is actually the public sector. Because it's in the name, right? Public sector. And at the same time, it is probably like the biggest, I don't want to say institution, but like the biggest case of unchecked centralization on the globe, because every nation has its own databases, it has its own ID system, it has its own healthcare system, and all of that goes through, whatever your country's, politics are on storing that information, on how it gets distributed, where it goes, and you have zero autonomy over that. And like, it's the scariest thing, because when you think about that, they actually own who you are, what medical procedures you may or may not have like had in some situations when you're talking about centralized healthcare and stuff in like governments. And it's just like these really fundamental things, because one, I don't want to say the word mafia and everything, but like, if you think about that, this kind of unchecked centralization is basically all of your information, your whole life, and your access, like your public permissions as an individual, so to speak, are being held by, let's just say, a benevolent mafia, a bunch of people, a political system. So that's what it really scares me. And I'm just like, I just wish that like we could bring the public sector and make it actually public, make it decentralized, make it not, somebody's just like, yeah, it's public, but we keep all the information in one place and only like this one body, or like, depending on like how, your political system is divided, 1, 2, 3, whatever bodies have like access and power over what happens with this information, the system, what we allow you to do, and like how we identify you, and, what happens with you in society. So that's mine. It's like, it's in the name, public sector.
That is a great one. I'm going to think on that one more. I really like that answer.
Because there's just so much that, it's everything from identity to like healthcare. And I'm just like repeating myself at this point. But I feel really strongly about that one. Okay, well, I always...
understandably so.
Yeah, we're kind of running out of time. So I always ask my guests at the end of the episode if there's anything they want to share, final thoughts for our listeners, that kind of stuff.
Honestly, not really. Go follow our Twitter and keep a lookout. We're launching in testnet beta later this month, and we're looking at doing mainnet beta in Q2 and mainnet in Q4. And I'm just looking to be able to have as many conversations with as many people as would be interested in doing so ahead of like some of these launches. But other than that, not really. I was just really happy to be here and chat with you.
Yeah, I think it was a really good talk. So, guys, I'll put all of the socials for Azeem, for myself, and for our organizations in the description. And yeah, catch us on our next episode. Bye.